Right now, a single point on the map is threatening to unravel the entire global economy. Day 12 of a brutal conflict has just snapped shut one of the world's most vital arteries. And the shockwaves? Well, they're already being felt everywhere. Let's break down what this means for you and me. It's the kind of question that probably keeps economists and world leaders up at night. What happens when a piece of geography we all just take for granted suddenly becomes a roadblock? And the answer? Well, we're seeing it play out in real time, and it's immediate and potentially catastrophic. So what exactly was flowing through that roadblock? This: 20 million barrels of oil every single day, and now that flow has just stopped. It's created this massive supply vacuum, and it is shaking the very foundations of the global energy market. And because of that, the entire global economy is officially on high alert. Believe me, this isn't just some regional conflict anymore. No, this is a worldwide economic event, a crisis that's literally unfolding by the hour. Okay, so let's zoom in on the epicenter of this whole crisis. We're talking about the Strait of Hormuz. For decades, this has been, without a doubt, the world's most critical choke point for oil transit. But today, it's a strategic battleground. So here's the harsh reality. We're on day 12 of this conflict, and get this, only 7 ships have managed to get through since it all started. Intelligence reports are suggesting Iran is deploying something like 6,000 sea mines, making any passage a deadly gamble. And because of all this, the financial markets, they're basically placing a 90% bet that the strait is going to stay closed for a long, long time. So with the actual physical flow of oil completely choked off, you can imagine what's happened to the financial markets that treat it. They've gone into an absolute tailspin. It is pure chaos. I mean, the initial shock to the market was just brutal. Before all this, oil was trading at a pretty stable $68 a barrel. Then, at the peak of the panic just a few days ago, it rocketed up to $119. That's a massive, massive price explosion, and it was driven by nothing but pure fear. But here's the crazy part. It's not just a one-way trip to the moon. In a single day of trading, we actually saw the price collapse by 17%, all the way down to $70 a barrel, only to rally back up 4% just hours later. This isn't about supply and demand anymore, not really. This is a market getting yanked back and forth on every rumor, every news headline, every politician's tweet. So what does that really mean? It means we are in a market that's being driven entirely by sentiment. We're talking about fear, hope, speculation. Those are in the driver's seat now, not logic or, hard economic data. And that is a dangerously unpredictable place to be. Okay, so with the markets going haywire, you've got the world's major powers scrambling, looking for some kind of emergency button. But the real question is there a button they can press that will actually work? Well, the G7, that's the club of the world's biggest economies, they've officially sounded the alarm. And that has triggered the International Energy Agency, the IEA, to start prepping for what could be the largest coordinated intervention in its entire history. But hitting that emergency button, it's not nearly that simple. It's a really high-stakes political game. First, the G7 has to signal the crisis. Then all 32 IEA member countries have to meet up and vote. And here's the real kicker. That decision has to be unanimous. A single no vote, maybe for some political reason, and the whole plan to stabilize prices gets derailed. Just like that. Now, in theory, if the IEA released every single barrel from both its strategic and commercial reserves, they could cover about 124 days of lost supply from the Gulf. And yeah, that sounds like a lot, but this is an absolute break glass in case of apocalypse scenario. It's probably never going to happen. And even if they did it, a massive release of reserves doesn't fix the real underlying problem. As analysts keep pointing out, this is a crisis of flows, not of stocks, right? You can dump a bunch of stored oil onto the market, but you can't magically unblock a superhighway. The fundamental logistical nightmare is still there. All right, so far we've been talking about, big picture stuff, energy markets, geopolitics. But now this whole crisis is starting to hit home, for all of us, in a very real and direct way. Because the ripple effect from an energy shock like this, it doesn't just stop at the pump. Oh no, it goes straight to the grocery store. This crisis is about to impact the price of the food on your table. To really get why, we need to talk about something called urea. It's the world's most common fertilizer. It's absolutely essential for growing the food we all eat. And what's the main ingredient you need to make urea? Natural gas. So you see the connection, right? When energy prices spike, fertilizer prices spike right along with them. It's a direct link. And it's not some future problem, it's already happening. Since this whole thing kicked off, the price of urea has already jumped by a staggering 40%. That is a massive increase. And you can bet it's going to be passed on to farmers, and then, eventually, to all of us, in the form of higher food prices. And if you look back at history, it gives us a really stark warning. In past oil shocks, like the ones back in the 70s, the inflation rate for food actually ended up being higher than the inflation rate for energy itself. Think about that. It's a truly devastating secondary effect. So let's recap. We've got a physical crisis in the Gulf, we've got a food crisis brewing, but then you look at the financial world, and it feels like investors are living in a completely different reality. I was talking to a market analyst just yesterday who put it perfectly. He said, when an entire market moves like a meme coin, it's time to be prudent. And that just perfectly captures the speculative mania that's gripped the markets, where prices are bouncing around with the volatility of some internet joke. And all of this really points to a deep, deep disconnect from reality. The markets are being driven by borrowed money, leverage, and pure sentiment. I mean, there is simply no fundamental economic reason for oil to swing from $119 down to $78 in just 3 days. The only thing that explains it is that investors are making this huge, massive bet that the conflict will just, poof, go away quickly. And the danger here is that this volatility could force central banks to delay those interest rate cuts we've been hoping for, which would keep the cost of things like mortgages and loans high for everybody. And so that leaves us with one final and, frankly, pretty sobering question. The entire financial system right now is priced for the absolute best-case scenario, a quick, clean resolution. But with a 90% probability that the world's most important waterway is going to stay shut, what happens if that massive trillion-dollar bet is wrong?